have spent, like Dave said, the better part of my career kind of working out of the Bay Area. And one of the places that I wanted to just kick off the presentation tonight is just to share a story of back in 2008. I was sitting in an executive briefing room briefing a series of Oracle executives on what we felt then was really going to be sort of the rise of the next generation of data management, and where we felt the industry was going with respect to data. And we started talking a lot about a lot of these open source projects, Hadoop and Pig, and we were talking about some of the NoSQL engines that were coming up, Mongo. And I remember that meeting very distinctly because looking around the room with the executives in Oracle, we actually started to get a lot of giggles happening because of the names of many of these projects in the open source community were so unusual to them. Zookeeper and there's all these sort of small projects within the Apache community, specifically around big data and Hadoop. And you know, at the time, we really were laughed out of that meeting. And this was 2000. This was, you know, not even 5 years ago. And I wanted to share that because, I mean, this is Silicon Valley, and ostensibly the people in that room were in the community in the Bay Area where this was all happening. And we were, you know, around the engineers and the meetups and the developers who are actually making this happen every day. And what's stunning about, I think, the era that we're living in right now is that the pace of change in our community is just really exploding, and it's things are happening faster today than I think that they've happened in most of the history, the trajectory of IT. And I wanted to, you know, really with this slide talk about, you know, how what we see in a 25-year history of Shanghai, just the stunning difference. I'm not. Yeah, I did put it in there. That's Shanghai in 25 years. And you see the infrastructure, and that infrastructure, that change that we see in Shanghai was really driven through commerce. And it was about the pace that commerce and the rise of China as part of the global manufacturing community. And that rate of change, as stunning as that is going to really pale in comparison to the pace of change around big data. We're literally creating more information every year than mankind has created in the history of mankind. And that content, whether it's web traffic or social network data or binary data from videos and photos, that content is increasingly being used to drive commercial value. And so I think that, you know, as far as, you know, how we see the economies of commerce and the way that businesses use information in order to drive value and make money and change the way consumers interact with their products, that's only going to get more and more interesting as time goes by. And I think that by the time we look back, you know, if we fast forward now 5 years from now, in 2022, and we look back to where we were here in 2013, I think we're going to be even more astounded at how quickly things are going to be changing in the next 5 years. IBM, of course, is an enormous IT business. I think by number of employees, we're the largest IT business in the world. We're making investments across the IBM Corporation in all of those explosive areas of information technology growth. And so when we look at the corporate priorities around IBM, we really see it along these 4 dimensions: big data, mobile, security, and cloud. And so the good news is we're hitting 3 of these 4 topics tonight. We've heard cloud and we've heard security. My talk today is really going to focus around data. And you know, the data opportunity is one, again, that's going to be explosive in our time. And there's a saying, I think, I'm not sure how cliche it's become yet, but data is the new oil. And what we see is that our organizations and clients that are leveraging big data and analytics are really looking to mine that information and mine the correlations, whether it's statistical or rules-driven, around how that data is predictive of consumer behavior and how you can use that information about your clients to drive more value and to drive higher returns and profit. And so, you know, we look at the types of capabilities along the left-hand side of this chart, whether it's going from raw data and turning that into actual insights that you can use in the business, enabling the business to be more flexible in how it adapts and responds to changing economic conditions. What we're really seeing, I think, is that paradigm shift from where we were 5 years ago, which was still predominantly for large organizations at what we'd call an ERP-driven, enterprise resource planning driven type IT shop, to really being much more flexible and agile, looking at leveraging information and content in new ways that really hadn't historically been done. And what we see with the emergence of big data is really four really interesting things that are happening. They're actually, really and honestly different. I think in IT, sometimes things can be fashionable and something can change from one period to the next, and it's really just fashion. In the case of big data, there are really four fundamental things that are happening here that really honestly are different. Number one is that we're dealing with more information. And so now we're able to do analytics at a petabyte scale. 5 years ago, that just literally wasn't possible. So it's the volume of data that we're dealing with is actually greater than we've seen before. The variety of information that we're able to analyze and link together is really fundamentally different today than it was 5 years ago. What we see now is a lot of semi-structured and unstructured content that's actually being commingled with structured data in order to drive analytic and predictive insights about clients and customer value. And so newer formats that we see, like JSON formats coming out of Twitter feeds or some of the social sites. We see a lot of unstructured content that are being mined from web pages, and we're able to do things like entity classification, where we're able to understand in a structured way content that's been written in unstructured formats on the web, and we're merging that at an analytics level to provide predictive analytics, analytics on client behavior and consumer interaction. And that's really different than what we saw even 5 years ago. The data in motion, the speed at which we're doing analytics today is different. In the US, I work with what traditionally had been clients that were very old school, manufacturing driven clients. One of the examples I like to talk about is a company called Caterpillar. They manufacture large equipment for construction sites, so diggers and earth movers and things like that. And one of the things that they're doing now, and this is just indicative of really what every automaker is doing, is they're putting telematics inside the equipment. So what's happening is that these diggers that are out of the construction site are actually now wirelessly communicating back to the home office and sending information about how every part and every piece of equipment is actually functioning on those earth movers. And this data is now being analyzed at the speed of the moment that it's coming in, so that they can now predict when there's going to be parts failures, and they can send replacement parts before the equipment has even failed. And so this type of real-time streaming analytics really just wasn't possible 5 years ago. The amount of sensors that we're seeing in, I think the aircraft that I took over from the US last night generated approximately 50 terabytes of information just on the transatlantic flight. And all of that information, well, I shouldn't say all of it, probably about 20% of it, is actually streaming back to Boeing's headquarters in Washington and being analyzed in real time by analytics software as the aircraft's actually flying over the Atlantic. And so these type of analytic solutions really just weren't possible 5 years ago. The last bit that I want to talk about here is actually the uncertainty of the data, the veracity of the data. And this really gets to how much you can trust the content, or at what level you rate the quality of the information you're receiving. There's the old saying about the signal-to-noise ratio. And so our last speaker is well aware, when you're looking at patterns in the aggregate, what you're seeing is sort of statistical patterns around behavior, but you're not really tapping into individual actions that users are taking on applications. And that's where, when we get to things like the veracity of the information, the data, understanding the quality of the content that you're analyzing, in order to build that trust and that confidence, to get it at a very high threshold, you need to be able to understand the data itself and actually know that you can trust the content that you're analyzing. And that's where what we see as being one of the areas that I specialize in IBM is in bringing that confidence to the analytics. And so when we talk about big data, it's not just about doing statistical analysis on more data and faster. It's actually also about making sure that we're better integrating that content, that we're able to cleanse it and do address validation and understand what is actually driving the application behavior behind the analytics, so that when clients are doing that work in their business and business intelligence systems, that they're able to actually correlate the analytics that are happening in their back office with what their clients are actually doing on their e-commerce platforms. The central concept that we're working with here at IBM around how we connect the different parts of the enterprise is something called the data fabric. And the data fabric for us is really about creating a compute platform that can link together enterprise resource planning applications, e-commerce systems, databases, websites, web services, any of the data-centric compute platforms within an enterprise, connecting that together within a common platform that has shared provisioning engines and shared access points. And so building products that can actually simplify the management of those data services and expose those at the application layer using web services and service-oriented architecture, database platforms, and managing them in a way that provides those governance capabilities to actually enhance and build the confidence in the underlying systems is really where a lot of these platforms are going. So the technology behind the data fabric really consists of a series of capabilities that range from being able to provision data in batch, connect with data in real time, being able to federate data from multiple repositories, being able to send messages and transactions across the wire as part of a service-oriented architecture, as part of RESTful web services, being able to use applications that provide master data management, developing a canonical view of the client, trusted view of your customer, of your products, and then also being able to tie together search and browse capabilities so that you can look at that unstructured content and do things like entity classification and begin to identify patterns in the data itself and link that together with structured repositories. And what we see that's really interesting with the fabric is where it's the intersection of these discrete capabilities that provide very high value to our clients. So if you look at the trajectory, and here now I'm very much talking about enterprise software, traditional enterprise software. The white boxes on the charts historically evolved from really independent enterprise market domains. So what we see up here is ETL tools really came up in the 1990s. Replication products also an era around 1990s as a standalone enterprise market. Data federation rose in kind of the early part of the 2000s as what's called EII, Enterprise Information Integration products. Messaging really came in two waves. We have our old school messaging as publish and subscribe infrastructure around the mainframe that came up in the early part of the 90s, and then the second wave was really service-oriented architecture. Search and browse capabilities, enterprise search, of course, coming up in the 90s. And the master data management, again, mid-2000s, as master data management really took off. But what we're seeing is the convergence of these independent software markets where the role of managing data in the infrastructure, the role of managing information in the infrastructure cannot be looked at from a siloed perspective, from an individual perspective, one at a time. What we're really seeing our clients across the board look at is how we can tie together these capabilities to link together the data that's managed from a search and browse capability, tying that together with master data management, tying it together with our messaging infrastructure, with federating databases, with providing a service-oriented architecture around applications, and linking that content throughout the enterprise in a way that's more cohesive and more consistent. And that cohesiveness and that consistency is really where the value of the fabric comes in, being able to derive a single point of management and administration around those set of capabilities. So this notion of simplifying the provisioning of data and the access of data to account for a lot of these different patterns of engagement are really where we're going with this data fabric at IBM. The fundamental integration and governance capabilities that we see being deployed as part of the fabric here really consist of providing data security, data cleansing, data integration, master data management, and data archiving. And so the title of my talk today was actually Mind the Data. And one of the messages that we really wanted to come across was that, you know, even as businesses go through explosive growth and you're generating more content and more information, and you're growing your customer base, or you're growing your product base, revenues are going through the roof, you're generating all this data. And in many businesses, you operate in a regulatory environment, or even if you're just trying to get more margins out of the clients that you've already got, the role of the data in actually helping drive that new value, those margins, and also operating within a tightly managed risk environment or a tightly managed regulatory environment becomes very critical. So I think we heard a little bit earlier about things like web security, infrastructure security, the web level. Here we're talking really about data protection, data security, and that's operating directly at the data level. So we see clients using data protection software are more for things like doing security monitoring on the databases. So you can actually set up a software-based firewall around a database infrastructure that monitors all the traffic coming in and out of those databases, and does things like we were hearing about previously, looking for pattern detection around the database access. The other thing that we're enabling a lot of folks forget about is masking of data in places where data is copied between environments. There are many good business reasons to copy data between infrastructure components, setting up different kinds of testing environments, exposing analytics to different business divisions and departments. But that data tends to, in many cases, contain very sensitive information. It could contain credit card information, user information, government IDs, things like that. And what you want to be able to do is mask that data in a way that it is becomes anonymized, so that you have that data is really anonymous, but that you're still maintaining the linkages between the information. A good example of this is you want to enable your business users to do analytics on information, but you don't want to expose the privacy of your clients. So you want that customer analytics, but you don't want your customer's privacy to be at the hands of, let's say, every tester that's writing an application in a test environment, or your business intelligence team that are looking for pattern analysis. So protecting your data can also be doing things like anonymizing it by masking data and maintaining the key relationships between the entities as they exist in the schema. And that can actually be a very complex problem to solve, as many application schemas can have many, many levels of depth or hierarchy in them, and so you need to maintain those relationships. Cleansing the information can be things like standardizing address formats, standardizing product hierarchies for complex product information. Integrating the data, of course, replicating from database to database, exposing it via web services, doing batch movement to load things like warehouses or Hadoop infrastructure, getting that data in places where it can be analyzed. Master data management is really about developing a trusted source of the truth around your clients. We call that golden records, creating a golden record of your clients, creating a golden record of your products, creating a golden record of your citizens. Whatever, there's different applications for master data management depending on industry, but in any case, it's really about developing that trusted source of the truth for your critical business information. And then, of course, for archiving, being able to store information in a way that you have what we call hot, warm, and cold storage, so that it can all be retrieved. There's many cases, regulatory environments, Basel II requirements often come into the mix in terms of the length of time you need to store information, how quickly it needs to be retrievable, how that information needs to be accessed and linked to information that's in production. So archiving can get quite a bit more complex than simply putting the data on tape and placing it in a vault. You actually need to maintain a lot of metadata about the information that you're archiving in order to remain compliant with a number of different regulatory, even not just governmental, it's also corporate compliance also plays a role in there. The value of the integration and governance components isn't just about compliance and regulatory, though. It's also about generating value, being able to drive bottom line. And what we see, IBM often does these surveys in the industry where we'll go out, we'll ask CIOs from the Global 2000 environments. What we've seen is that clients that rank themselves high on the maturity scale for governance tend to rate themselves as being 3 times more successful than their competitors by results. And so that correlation, if you will, between how well you've integrated your data and how well you are managing and governing your data tends to also reflect itself in business value and not just from a regulatory sense. What we see is that those same clients are better able to create trust in their information. So as that data goes out through analytic platforms, through business intelligence platforms, and the lines of business are consuming that, the confidence in the data actually goes up. And the trust that the business users have in that information rises. And that means that business can be more flexible, more adaptable to respond to those analytic platforms. I wanted to just wrap up there with the same chart that we started with at the beginning. I think the next 5 years are going to be even more crazy than the last 5 years were. The next Hadoop is out there somewhere. I don't know what the next MapReduce is going to be. MapReduce 2, Yarn. We see a lot of investment going on in this area. One thing we know for sure is that the data growth is going to keep going crazy like this. And so whether it's the content that you all are generating in the lines of business that you're in today about your clients, whether it's the content that's being generated from the telematics of the vehicles we drive, or the earth movers that build the buildings that we're in, or even smart buildings about the temperature and the climate of the rooms that we're in, the data that we're creating is going to continue to go through the roof. And it's actually the software. It's the software that provides the analytics to make sense of that data. So we can, when we look again at cloud and we look at security, network security, and we look at data, by the time we're getting down to driving business value in the applications that we write, it's actually about the software that's running in the data center in the cloud, that's behind the firewall in the data center, that's actually generating that business value for our clients, that's driving the growth behind the applications and the services that we provide, whether it's on our mobile devices or on the ERP systems that run our HR environment, or our financial systems that close the general ledger of our books every week in our larger organizations. It's that software that's actually providing the insight in the data is where our business decision makers get the trust and the confidence in the decisions that they're making that drive the business. So that was really the main message I wanted to leave in terms of, mind the data, and if you don't watch out, the data will mind itself for you. So thanks a lot for your time tonight. I appreciate it.